find our common ground to get some shit done. So I'm really, really happy to be here and happy to continue our conversation. And as always, people will be coming in late and leaving early as their schedules allow, and we're totally fine with that. Do what you need to do. I do want to acknowledge that I'm here this morning Brawley Chesworth and Becky Tilson from the City of Portland, BES. I know there are Water Bureau reps here too, but when I go over the Portland Change story, Alice and Becky are a big part of that story. So I'm really happy to have them both here today. But before we get started, let's go ahead and do a quick round of introductions just so we can connect a name and a face and a voice and support each other this morning. So I've done this a couple of different ways. It seems like it's always a little bit awkward, but I will call names and hopefully we can move through quickly. Doug, why don't we start with you?
I'm Doug Stewart. I'm a supervising engineer for the Portland Water Bureau. I'm in charge of the Water Bureau's asset management program.
Great, thanks, Doug. Chris?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Wu from Metro Vancouver, Canada. I'm responsible for asset management and capital planning program.
Excellent. Welcome. Mert?
Good morning, everyone. Mert Maftu-Gill. I am an engineer within the asset management branch of the Portland Water Bureau.
Great. Mike Sweeney?
Sorry, you caught me muted. I'm Mike Sweeney from Toho Water Authority based in Kissimmee, Florida, and I'm Deputy Executive Director of the authority and work my way to a lot of things, including engineering, workforce, and asset management. Thank you. Good morning again.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for joining. Jessica?
Hey, Jessica Dezar from Loudon Water in Virginia, the Asset Management Program Director.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Becky?
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Becky Tilson. I was the project manager for the recent organizational transition we went through, now focused on implementing that vision.
Great, thank you. Alice?
Hi, Alice Brawley Chesworth, also from Portland BES, and I'm sort of a jack of all trades, doing whatever sort of needs to be done around here.
Great, and Makeda?
Makeda Weaver from DC Water and Sewer Authority in Washington, DC. I am a program manager in our People and Talent Division, managing change management, project management, anything employee engagement and training.
Great, thank you for joining us this morning. Scott.
Well, I think I know everybody except maybe Rebecca or Becky a little less, but Scott Haskins from Seattle. Glad to be working with you all on the project.
Great, and Cello.
It seems like I joined the Engineers Anonymous group. I'm also an engineer and happy to be here with you guys.
Excellent, thank you, Cello. And I'm Donnie Chiama, Deputy Director at BES, Bureau of Environmental Services in the City of Portland. So I wanted to just start with any updates or news that Scott and Cello want to give us before we dive into our next case study. Also, I believe, was it Kansas City that had suggested that they also, but I don't see anyone here from Kansas City this morning, so maybe we'll loop back on that request depending their attendance. But do you have any updates for us, Scott and Cello, before we jump in?
Well, I think Cello's going to do most of the talking, but we're pretty excited about some things that are going on overall and pulling, you know, these three people side teams together, as well as the other teams go too. But, you know, and fantastic presentation by Makeda last time with her colleagues, and looking forward to this one. And I think we're going to want to start to narrow down, you know, towards in addition to the sharing that we're doing, basically to start to talk about deliverables and the workshop and that kind of thing. Cello?
Yes, I don't want to take too much time. Just want to say that we are going forward really well on several of these initiatives. There are basically 7 things going on concurrently, and a lot of energy and enthusiasm. So like Scott said, we're gonna start zeroing in on the deliverables, such as things that are part of the methodology. But I can maybe, if there's a little bit of time later at the end, I can jump in with more detail, but I would like to make sure that Portland BS has enough time to go through the presentation first.
Okay, great. Any questions or any follow-up from DC Water from last time? I don't know if you have any comments or questions. It was a really great presentation, and really happy to have your PowerPoint, Makeda. Maybe we'll follow up on that as we get into the deliverables. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other comments, then I am going to jump into sharing my screen and jumping into a PowerPoint that we have for BES's change management story. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So BES is a utility within Portland government. There are 27 bureaus in the city, and water and wastewater and stormwater are the utilities. BES covers the wastewater and stormwater. And so we're a little bit unique as utility because we're nestled within city government and subject to the political forces within city government. But we had a number of, I guess, misfortunes, but it ended up being a positive in the end, where we had a lawsuit that was questioning how we were spending ratepayer dollars. We had a major overrun on a project that was out at our treatment plant, and we had a referendum to privatize. So it was a perfect storm of three very unusual things. And basically our director of 20 years was fired, to use an impolite word, and at the time, Commissioner Nick Fish, who has since passed away, brought in someone who was a public administrator and an elected official, not an attorney, not someone mired in environmental politics, but really, I see him as almost a city manager. So Mike Jordan was brought in as our director, and very shortly after that, he hired me as his deputy. I had been at BES for close to 18 years at that point. So we had a major change in leadership, and Mike was very gung-ho on getting us a new strategic plan and engaging the Bureau. And he described it, he would walk around and say, you know, you folks are in a bunker. Like, you need to like step up and look around and kind of get in touch with what's going on in the rest of the world. And he was a real activator in that. And we made a good team because I had a lot of relations in the Bureau, and Mike really asked us to focus on three things: business process improvements, organizational change, and then people and culture, and change management being a big part of that. So we're very grateful for Mike's leadership and his activation and kind of getting us going. This is a bit of a timeline that shows the last 4 or 5 years. One thing I want to point out is this employee survey that we did in 2016. We had 75% response rate, and it really was a call for change. So I think, you know, Mike's observation that we were in a bunker, he kind of opened the doors and let us know, hey, there's a great big field out there. You're all welcome to join. And that's when we launched our strategic plan. Very unusually, we and I have to say, against my better judgment, I advised Mike that we should also be looking at our CIP process, our biggest business process, at the same time we were doing our strategic plan, because it really was the power center of the Bureau. We just finished the big pipe projects, 2 huge, it was the biggest capital project in the history of Portland, 2 huge tunnels on both sides of the Willamette River. And it really needed some refining, and I was really advocating for shared ownership and shared management of the Bureau, and that engineering services was not necessarily the end-all be-all for the organization. So as we wrapped up the strategic plan, we overhauled our CIP delivery process and made some new commitments about creating a project management office. And as that was kind of wrapping up, then we created a BES transition team that really took change management on head on and looked at our current state, looked at where we had gaps and what was needed, what we needed to invest in, and then imagined a future state. Basically propelled us into a bureau-wide reorganization. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, BES has about 660 employees. So it's a pretty big organization, not as big as DC Water, but within city government, we definitely have, you know, a major force as the Water Bureau is within a city government.
Dawn?
Yeah.
Dawn, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
Would you want questions from
Sure.
people as we go? I mean, we don't want to bog it down because we want to get through it. But I was curious because it relates to some of the other teams as well, as you had employee survey down there.
Yep.
And with a 75% response rate. And is that something that you're continuing to, you know, to do and to use, or do you have plans to do that? And did you get into not just what can the BES do for you, to employee supervisor satisfaction or anything controversial?
Alice, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so that particular survey had a lot of things that were leading pretty much into the strategic plan, but we have done a follow-up survey that was getting at a lot more specifically what you said, is that sort of relationships and how people feel safe in the organization and expressing themselves, and if we deal with conflict well. And we are planning to continue to follow up on that so that we can track over time.
Yep.
And I will say that before that survey, there was people did not want to take surveys. There was a belief that no one would ever listen anyway. And now I believe we've restored trust. And so when we do, I mean, of course, there's still always work, but when we do surveys, people believe that their input is being considered and factored into our decision making. So I think we've kind of gone over the hump on that, which is great.
That sounds like a key characteristic for change.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And please.
And actually, Chris has his hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see that. Can you go back to the timeline slide? So you mentioned on the yellow band, you've created the project management office, and there was a subsequent change management plan. So was the change management plan around creating the PMO and how it sort of shifted the strategy from, you know, individual PMs managing projects to PMO sort of governing the overall process? Because Metro Vancouver has just created a PMO office, I mean, without a clear mandate and objective yet, and it will be very interesting to see how sort of you guys did it.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's still a work in progress for sure. And I didn't really know when we kicked off the CIP process improvements that we would be creating a PMO, but we did we did some research on best practices and looked across the country and found that creating a PMO was going to be the best way to kind of reset what we were doing. It was very difficult. Engineering services was very resistant, and we had to, there was some tough times while we did that. And basically what we said then is once we reorged and put resources into a PMO, that it influenced so much of the rest of the Bureau that it activated us to look at the whole business process, the whole Bureau, all of our services, and all of our resources. So what started with just the intention to get a better business process for project management ended up expanding into the whole Bureau and having us kind of realign everything so it matched that new PMO. The change management plan, so to speak, it was a little bit, it's a little informal, I would say, and we've used PMI heavily. We've relied on PMI practices and done a lot of training there, a lot of collaborative work. It has been fairly organic, and I think that people appreciate the level of transparency and engagement, and we were very clear we would start with bigger projects. It didn't mean that all projects would go in, so it's very much been a transition and getting people on board and trying things on and slowly growing what's possible. So it's not an enterprise project management office yet. We would like that, but right now it's just a capital project management office, and it's starting to blend into something we refer to as portfolio management. So it's starting to influence how we organize pots of money, which ultimately I think will lend itself to a bigger set of changes, but it's still all kind of in transition. Does that help?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I'm not watching for hands, so anyone just please feel free to stop me. So these were our 6 goals of our strategic plan. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but what I do want to say that in the past, BES pretty much lived in these 2 worlds of service delivery and responsive systems and decision making. This was really how we were oriented. We're kind of asset managers at the core. And what this exercise did by engaging all of our employees was absolutely brought forth, whoops, as I modify my PowerPoint, absolutely brought forth the need for culture and workforce development to be on the same plane as these other kind of core things that we've done. And it re-energized our commitment to community relations. BES is kind of under the radar in some ways in Portland. And we're still wrestling with this. I mean, yesterday our leadership team just talked about it, but it at least brought it forward as something we're committed to. We haven't quite figured that out. And then leadership in government, that we have a role to play. In the past, it was like, don't look up. Don't look up, and don't have anybody get in our business. But now with Mike's leadership and with, I think, the shared ownership we've really expanded beyond these 2 ideas of service delivery to include these other things. So this is something I am particularly proud of our bureau that we came together to develop this kind of a vision. It was a big step.
No wonder you're excited about this project.
Yeah,
Fits right in.
It does, yeah. So it called for, so once we finished it, we're like, okay, now we've activated everybody. What are we going to do? And again, Mike's formula for us was look at the workforce, the business processes, and the organizational structure. We'd already started with the project management stuff, and as I said, kind of spilled into the rest of the bureau. So this is a terribly messy process map that I really don't like to look at. But what I would like to just call out is that in the past, you can see here, so it's kind of, I'll highlight integrated system planning, portfolio management, problem clarification, and then investing as kind of the big, oops, wait, I'm sorry. My box is in the way here, program and project delivery in this small green box. And so in the past, all the energy and fighting was here. And when we did our CIP prep work, we're like, oh my gosh, we have so much work to do in this integrated planning and this portfolio management that would kind of stop the fighting and get more clear about things before we activate a line item in a budget and a project manager to go implement something. So the big news out of the CIP prep process was we got down here and we mapped all the detail, and we said, oh boy, there's a lot of work to do at the upstream end of this work, and we believe that our investment in that upstream will really help us move past a lot of the hurdles we saw in program and project delivery. Let's see, move to the next slide. I don't know why it's not advancing. So what ended up happening then was the mother of all process maps, not really, even for when it's printed 8 feet long, easy to look at, but it did capture everything. And so, we started with our strategy and our drivers. We have all this planning, and there's more detail here because this is where we did a lot of the work. Proportionally, it does not mean there's necessarily more steps or more resources. So proportion doesn't really matter so much as to say we did a lot of work here. Here's portfolio investment, and then here's delivery. And one of the other really big things that we did is we acknowledge program delivery was as important as project delivery. And so there was also a big call to reconcile and to have both inform each other and not be so independent. And that's what portfolio management in many ways is doing. And then it also, which doesn't show in this map, but we also have a call to do more work in our O&M, the O&M side of the house. And that was part of what we hope to accomplish with our reorganization.
Dawn,
Yeah.
we don't want to read all that detail, but what are the elements going down the left-hand side? Can't read them at all. But what are you trying to capture side? Going down?
Do you mean here?
Yeah.
So Becky can probably remember this. This is participants. So these are all the people we engaged with. This section here, from top to bottom, is the process that we are talking about. What the beginning of the process. So this really is the swim lane, so to speak, of all of our lines of business. And then I kind of did that backwards. And then I think this is just this is strategy and drivers. Does that help?
Yeah. So process is really what it is, and swim lanes, and then across is what are the kind of the programs that you're addressing there.
Right. And then the key milestones with these diamonds of key kind of stage gates or milestones.
Yep.
So then what we did was reorganize the Bureau to reflect our business process. And so we've referred to this as a functional org chart. There were a bunch of loose ends, and we weren't always able to achieve that exactly. But you can see here that this does reflect more or less our business process: strategy, integrated planning, program deliveries, capital projects, O&M, and then these three boxes are the support services. Here's all of our HR and accounting and budget. Here's technology and our laboratory, and then here's engineering services. So, for the most part, we ended up again investing and moving resources here, and we took quite a few resources out of engineering services and put them into the PMO. There's still a lot of work to do here. I mean, I really feel like the next phase of my career is to roll up my sleeves and to get into all of this. I don't feel like I think there are like 180 employees in this section, and they're so kind of overextended. We didn't have time to get them into looking at business process mapping and the changes. But right now we're really trying to give them enough resources so they can do their job and then reflect on how they can do it better. The other thing quickly I'll note, as you can see here, watershed O&M, one of the big, I don't know if I'd call them a fight, for shorthand, I'll call it a fight. One of the big fights with this work was we used to have a group called Watershed Services, and that was kind of the environmental arm of the Bureau. And it was why there were many kind of battles within the Bureau. Is like there's the environmentalists and there's the engineers, and at every intersection we're going to make you declare what side you're on. And so we disbanded that group, and a lot of it ended up in strategy and integrated planning, but some of it did end up in program delivery, project management, and O&M. And the community and employees were really concerned that we would lose our environmental ethic and our commitment to watershed health. So a lot of the work that we are doing right now is assuring people that, this all adds up to our mission for watershed health. And it's not perfect, but we're still working with that. So I'm almost done here. The really interesting thing about having a pandemic and having a racial justice kind of unleashing and really this commitment to ending systemic racism in our city and in our organization, it really, and the fires, and it can pile on all the political things that have been happening, but what it really did was forced us to do what we kind of knew we had to do anyway, but it made it happen, I think, much more quickly, is that we really need to look at the people, and we really need to look at what we're doing for equity, what we're doing for training and work workforce, how we support our employees, what we're doing for management, and then getting a little bit more disciplined around change management because we've been a little ad hoc about it. So I love this slide and I love this part of the storytelling because it really has brought us to the place of considering our people and the hearts of our people and what they need and what we need to move forward to heal all the wounds in our community and how BES can be a part of that. So a big, I don't know that we would have made as much progress if the circumstances hadn't been so clearly in front of us and for us to face.
Is that the heart and the brain and and love somehow?
Yeah. Thanks to Alice for that. So our change management story, like I said, is a little bit messy. We looked at ADCAR and ProSci and Peak. I remember Peak was really, I don't know if you're familiar with Peak, but Denver has a kind of employee-led change management system that they've documented, and the person who championed that wrote a little handbook. And within Portland City government, there's a group of people that are a little cohort of supporters around Peak. So that has always been, in my mind, kind of a special little source of energy and inspiration. But of course, we've turned to ADCAR and ProSci for more disciplined approaches. And it's always been a part of our technology tools. I mean, there's obviously software development and software implementation speaks this language. And so some of us knew it better than others if we were involved in those projects. We did take a close look at the 5 whys and really spent some time thinking about those ideas, and it fed into our strategic plan work. The transition, again, used this current state, looked at what needed to happen in a transition and imagined a future state. We're still very much in somewhere in this zone. I already mentioned the cohort for Peak. I think the challenges is that we are not we have not embraced these more disciplined approaches because I think we're cautious about having to buy something hook, line, and sinker. We're very much we want our own self-destiny, and we don't. We're just cautious about, I think, buying a whole kind of program or already defined thing, and we want to invent it ourselves. And we, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are the core of, I think, a lot of the work that we've done has always been with the assurance that asset management, levels of service, managing risk was really like, that's who we are. We're asset management people. And so don't rock that apple cart because, these things might ask us to do things differently. And we're not quite sure what that means. So we hang on tight to what we know about asset management, and we kind of cautiously, I think, try on these other change management tools. Then, like everyone, we're experiencing right now an overwhelming amount of change. People are exhausted. They're, not certain of the future. In Portland today, our mayor was reelected. That does offer a little bit of stability for us, but we will have a new city council, and we'll get a new commissioner assigned to us. And a lot of people are retiring, and I could go on and on. So it's I think particularly I'll mention Portland is experiencing a lot of homelessness, a lot of houselessness, and people are really worried about the fabric of our city. The racial inequities and the racial divide is huge, and the houselessness issue is huge. And then we're trying to get this work done, and it definitely feels overwhelming. So it's very important for us as leaders to kind of keep our wits about us and stay strong and centered, and assure people we'll get through this. And we've got good bones and good roots, and I think that we will be able to weather this. But of course, the social circumstances weigh heavily on us. So the last thing, where do we go from here? We're going to continue our commitment to this transition work and the reorganization and supporting new teams and this new way of thinking. Alice and I and one of our trainers had an amazing conversation yesterday about, this is really a key moment to redefine our culture and to really invest in it and put our money where our mouth is, and really stay true to our commitment. I think that there are a few groups that are particularly fragile, close attention to right now, both our strategy group and our integrated planning, but particularly our strategy group. Next bullet, change management and how to make that compatible with asset management. And I will highlight one area that I hope we can learn something about as we talk to our partners is metrics, because we've really struggled with that and have gone from these kind of high level community understandable goals or outcomes, I guess you can call them. And then we get into the nitty gritty, like what's in your work plan and how many widgets are you putting out? And it feels like the two never meet. And we just keep kind of spinning around in this space of trying to create a framework of metrics, and it's getting really frustrating for most people. So I would love to see some resolution in our metrics world as we move forward. And then, buy-in across the Bureau is always, it's a kind of, easy thing to say, buy-in, but I think there's a very strong set of core believers, and then there's a lot of people that are, not quite as invested. And there's work to do around becoming a more mission-driven, purpose-driven organization, and that people can see themselves within that mission. So that's our story in a nutshell. I think I'm well within the time here, so can take any questions you have. And Becky and Alice, I certainly encourage you to fill in any gaps I left out.
And I think Scott has his hand up.
Yeah, just a question for you, Dawn, and I hope others, I'm trying to encourage everybody to be giving, feedback and observations and ask questions. But, you have a wonderful overall context that you're using, and you've really invested in it, and it cuts across the whole organization. So it's an organization-wide thing. I'm curious whether you are back to that chart we couldn't read probably, but are you tackling, I'm just making this up, but here are 3 things, or here are 5 things where we want to go from what you had on the slide to as is to future state and transition, and using change management process to help you get there?
Yeah, well, I'm going to let Becky answer this question, but I do want to say that certainly the leadership team, so I'll speak just to what I know, and then I think Becky and Alice can speak to the broader Bureau. I mean, not only what I know, but where I spend most of my time in Headspace. The leadership team is going through a major transformation. We've added new people, 4 people have left, or I should say 3 people have left. So we had a leadership team that had very change for a long time, and now we're adding new ingredients, and we have a commitment to racial equity, and we're doing some really hard work around that right now. And I personally have a strong interest in breaking down that hierarchy and not having and Micah said too, we want to push decision making down to the lowest part of the organization. We want to see more fluidity between our leadership team and our management teams. And so I'm personally really committed to that. We have to improve relations in our leadership team, and then make it more fluid in terms of the overall culture and leadership between all layers of management. So that's one part. And then Becky and Alice, you can fill in the other parts.
Yeah, thanks, Don, and good question, Scott. Don mentioned that a lot of this was employee driven and that it was highly participatory, which to me was one of the things that really stuck out about this project, is that it was really a lot of employees were very deeply involved in creating all of the products. Also going to be deeply involved in implementing the vision of the project, or the transition project that we did. So there are a lot of these, we're calling them initiatives, that are starting to be implemented right now. And they're being owned by people in teams across the Bureau, which is that was the goal. It makes it a little bit tricky to kind of track and manage everything, but people who are subject matter experts at whatever they're experts at are then moving forward with these individual initiatives, and they're working together with one another. The PMO has been a great example. I know Don talked a lot about that. There's been an enormous amount of work done at that level in terms of, what are the roles and responsibilities with PMO versus engineering services versus integrated planning? What are the handoff points? What are the roles and responsibilities? They have RACI diagrams, they have process maps. And then Alice and I are working on getting some consultant resources in place, probably for the spring, that will help us take that overall process map that Don shared and sort of have it as the larger framework for all of the teams to kind of plug into. So teams will be able to establish and sort of write down their processes in a little bit more detail, because as detailed as that thing is, it doesn't necessarily tell one person how to do their work. So it'll allow the teams to kind of expand their processes and then plug that into the larger thing. And I think, we had a change manager for a while, and she talked about change management as communications and training as sort of that magical mix. And I know this is a group of change management experts, so I'm not saying anything new here, but that's definitely something that we've been focusing on as well, is how do we communicate clearly about this? How do we make sure that the training's in place? And then how do we reinforce? So.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I totally agree with everything that was said, but, one of the things is I think part of the message there is that we didn't just choose, a discrete number of things that we're going to take through the full-blown change management structure. Rather, we're trying to sort of start with that throughout the organization to think more about getting people on board and having participation and getting feedback and having that two-way communication. So that's one piece of change management. And so we're trying to do that sort of organization-wide rather than sort of what you said, like picking three things and like taking it full on through change management. And so, it's tricky. It's always difficult to decide which of those things to do. But as Becky said, because we wanted people to really take control and control their own destiny more, it just seems better to sort of start with the first part of the process rather than trying to start with only a few discrete little projects.
Makeda has her hand up.
Yep, please, Makeda.
Yeah, I had a question. Really good stuff. And I know that you guys, again, seem very value and oriented, mission driven. How do you set the scope to move things forward when you have to align with so many different initiatives and priorities? Because I know people want you to save the world while you're managing assets, right? So
Makeda, this question is too smart, too difficult. You gotta. I'm just kidding around. It's 7. We started at 7:30 on the West Coast. I just wanted to, I'm sorry. Just wanted to bring a little levity into this, but it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a PhD level question for sure. We struggle. We struggle. I think that's part of what Alice and Becky were both saying, that people don't know what the priority is, and they're a little bit confused about how we're approaching it. And we had to this past month. I'll just speak honestly. I mean, our communications folks had people were out sick. The fires, people were moved out of their homes. I mean, we just had there was almost radio silence for a month or two in the summer. And everybody was kind of left to their, I mean, I don't want to overplay it, but it's hard. It's hard to keep everyone in this remote world understanding what the mission is. And even when we were working together and in the same building, it was hard to do. So I think it is part of the struggle that we have. We're trying to put in tools like charters and teams and cross bureau collaboration, that kind of thing, but it does it gets overwhelming and kind of muddy. Go ahead, Becky.
I totally agree, Don, and I would just add that part of what we're hoping to do, and I don't know if you were specifically referring to scope of the change project or scope of the work of the Bureau, but with regard to the work of the Bureau, what we're trying to do with this portfolio management approach is have a way to institutionalize and sort of operationalize our values. So we have all these values that Don mentioned in the strategic plan circle thing. And then trying to figure out how to turn that into investment decisions. It's proven to be quite challenging. I think it will bear fruit in the end, but it has taken some time to develop. But and Don mentioned sort of the watershed history, and we all want to protect watersheds, and we want to protect public health, and we want to do this, we want to do that, and it gets bigger and bigger. And the idea is that we have these values that were enumerated pretty clearly in the strategic plan. And then normally those things maybe just sit on the shelf, and then you say, okay, well, I guess we could point back to the strategic plan. If you bend your mind enough, anything could fit into that set of values. And so the portfolio management approach is an attempt, at least, to try to help us in making those decisions. And then the watershed stuff, I think the goal is that it's, instead of being present in one group, it's present in all groups. So anyway, we're working on that. I don't know if that sort of answers your question, or if you were speaking more about the project.
No, yeah, it does. I think, yeah, getting stuff written down, getting input, all that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Doug, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Don, I just sent you an email, and I sent you a presentation I did for the AMP committee last week.
Okay.
We're certainly not perfect about it, but we're using a framework that we adapted out of the International Infrastructure Management Manual that knits strategic service levels to the asset service levels to what we call sort of workload measures.
Okay.
It's a way to tie all those service level metrics together in a way that starts to make sense.
Excellent.
If you take a look at that presentation, and if you're interested, give me a shout.
Okay, we'll definitely follow up on that.
It's not a formulaic approach. It's not A plus B always equals C, but it's a way to start to organize, metrics
to start
from
to
top to bottom.
hardwire it together. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Doug,
I mean, it's always a work in progress, and there's always adjustments, but you want to be able to tie, what are the strategic outcomes I want, to what do the customers get, to what do the assets need to provide, to what does the organization need to do to get all of that to work, right? It's my question for you, though, is back to one of your earlier comments. I know that we're both looking at implementing Infor public sector currently. We're doing business process workflow mapping at the Water Bureau pretty heavily. We hired an outside consultant, and I'm wondering if you guys had considered doing something similar. And it might help answer some of your O&M questions that you talked about when you were on that slide, in terms of a way to organize and bring some structure to sort of that side of the organization.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think we know that the level of investment for Infor is huge, and we've all been put on notice. This is going to have a big impact. I don't think that we fully realized, there's kind of the strategy and planning side of the world, and the people that have done this transition work and the people that are responsible for implementing Infor are in a little bit different world. And I think your question is awesome, and we should definitely, Alice and Becky, make sure you make a point of that, and we definitely need to make a connection there. So it's a great question. That's really a clue how to move forward. So I appreciate that. Who is your consultant for process mapping?
We got Stantec.
Okay, great.
It's a several month process, and we're doing it sort of offline from everything else. And we're doing, of course, as is and then to be. It's going to be interesting to now talk about change management. We're bringing change management practices into that process. It's going to become, the as-is processes were fairly easy because everyone wants to talk about the way things are today and how much we like that.
Yeah.
Change management comes in to say, well, okay, now we're going to have to change.
Yeah.
What does that look like, and how do we get everyone on board with it? Because we know the new system will cause us to do things differently than the way we actually operate today, and should. Right?
Yeah. And just to add to that, as Becky kind of mentioned, we're getting some consultant support in place. One of those is going to be process mapping. And Becky and I have been going around to all of our managers and asking, what kinds of processes would you want to have mapped, among other things. And yeah, O&M is definitely part of that conversation, and I think they are starting to see the value of that because they are bringing up things like that as well. And it might be part of the Infor conversations they're having with you, or it might just be a general realization that this is necessary, and so we are heading in that direction.
Yeah, great. Chris, your hand up has been up for a while. Make sure.
Yeah, just related to that Infor product. So we are using Infor product. Unfortunately, it was not configured properly to do proper asset management and work management. It was strictly for basically work order generating system. So there's a lot of sort of pushback from the senior management to sort of canvass the market again and see if we have the right tool. So we're spending a lot of time on that. I mean, I kind of understand. Technology is not really the root cause. It's really the process around and people are using that tool. So hopefully that sort of passes that sort of validation process. And really our GM mentioned that it's not really like a $4 million, a couple $1 million software implementation project. It's really like tens of $millions of changing the business process, improving and mapping out. So I'll be very interesting to see how the two Portland organizations will progress that initiatives.
Well, don't tell us if we picked the wrong tool, Chris.
No. It's a tier. I don't know if you saw that Gartner's Magic Quadrant, the UAIM. So Maximo, IBM Maximo, and Infor are the two top tier 1 products. Right. So I mean, I know for a fact it's not the tool, it's just the way it was implemented, but then the perception that the organization is having is so diluted and deteriorated.
That's why we're spending so much time working on getting business process workflows outlined now so that we can avoid some of that pain later.
I think you're on the right track,
Don, if you don't mind, I mean, I know that we have 10 minutes left basically, and we want to make sure that we get Cello's, comments that will help integrate things a bit. But I just wanted to throw out there, maybe Cello wants to comment on it too, is one of the big benefits of UAIM, and I see Mike Sweeney and others who've been, and Doug and Mert, Chris, who've been part of this, is that this back and forth sharing is really an important part of it's part of the value proposition, frankly. And what we've had a lot of is kind of conversion by these people to some standard business process documentation methodology, which you might want to, consider. And, Cello, as well as Mike Barnett, is a great resource to help with that, but also just the sharing of artifacts. So, where we have some back and forth and you say, hey, can you share this with me and can I do this? There are some proprietary issues that can come up, but to the extent that we can share documents that are going to benefit everybody, that's one of the big values of the project.
Yeah, that's great. Mert, you had your hand up for some time. I don't know if it was related to Doug's comments. Is there anything that you'd like to add? No? Okay. And then Chris, you spoke.
Sorry, I was muted down. I wanted to add one thing, and we don't have to answer it today because I think it may be kind of long, but sounds like you mentioned and Chris kind of followed up on the creation of the PMO and how you had to sort of move people around a little bit and maybe assign new responsibilities and everything that goes with that. We are not yet on the to-be workflow development, but based on Doug's and I's and others sort of experience on like a kind of like a best appropriate workflow for an organization such as ours, we already kind of have this like wish list of like significant changes, and it's not going to be necessarily easy to just roll those out. So you may have had a lot of sort of like lessons learned on your end on that sort of a transition. So I think it would be good for us to sort of learn from your experience too in the field. Again, it's probably a lot, so we probably cannot do it today. But I would be interested in hearing about that.
This is a bit of a joke, but I'll give you our big lessons learned. We actually, our official reorganization was, I think, the very end of the first week of March. So our first lesson learned is do not reorganize a week before everybody's sent home for a pandemic.
Okay, that's yeah, fair point.
And Becky did a nice
Yeah.
job. I'm going to turn it over to Cello here. So I don't think we should not spend time right now to answer the question, but I will. Becky did a nice job summarizing our lessons learned, and then the Water Bureau and BES have a meeting to discuss this UAIM project Thursday afternoon. Both Mert and Doug are invited to a mostly BES staff meeting to talk about our role in UAIM. So let's pick that question up, and I'm happy to share it with the UAIM team as well. I think Becky will talk. We can get the artifact and get it posted on the team site so you can all take a look at it. Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay,
Yep.
Great. Thanks for that question, Mert.
Thank you.
So Cello, it's all yours.
Doug, your hand is still up.
I just wanted to add a footnote that we're going to adopt the ProSci ADCAR process. So hopefully we will probably be picking BES's brain as we go along.
Good.
Okay, so I just want to emphasize a couple of things that Scott has also mentioned. One of them is that Portland BES joined fairly recently. I think it would be, we've spent the past 3 years helping people use a structured and standard ISO standard methodology and notation for business process modeling. And we've actually done a collaboratively developed a higher level model for the CIP process. And we have a team that's looking at it right now as we speak and comparing notes from different. So I think it may not be a bad idea to I can send you some links to a couple of meetings that have happened recently. There's a lot to catch up on, but there is some activity going on that your folks may benefit from. And the second point about artifacts is that this is something that has been very beneficial. And so whenever somebody posts, everybody gains. So if Doug mentioned some things, so there was some interest from when he presented it a few days ago. So if he could, if it's possible to post that and share with others, I think that seeing an example is very helpful. And you can ping me offline on the business process modeling stuff. I'd be happy to spend time with you and your staff to kind of show you what we've been doing.
Yeah, so, let's get that scheduled. Definitely Portland wants to hear that.
Yes. So that's what I wanted to say.
Great. Scott, do you have anything that you want to add?
Well, I think maybe moving on to what's ahead, and yes. In that context, maybe you, Don or Cello, want to comment on that, because looking ahead to next week, we have 5 minutes left, but maybe what's going on overall, how does this fit, and what are we going to be needing to drive to in terms of deliverables, and what are a couple of those next steps? Maybe have a discussion around that.
Yeah, Cello, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest something. What I'd like to do is send you guys a video. It's not that long, of the last meeting that we had with another group, with the workforce group. So you'll see how we're going about defining a maturity model. And we're starting with levels 1 and 5. And we had a discussion a couple of days ago. What is, when it comes to workforce, absolutely terrible on level 1, and what is absolutely wonderful on level 5? Now, we're all gonna, later on we can fill in the 2, 3, and 4. But I think a discussion like that was very helpful, because once we establish a structure for a maturity model, then it helps us all get on the same page. The maturity model will point to some deficiencies and gaps that we want to close and stuff like that. So if that's okay with you, Don, I'd like to just send it just a link to one of the UAIM recent meetings, which may be helpful, because the methodologies like ProSci have some nice aspects to it, but maybe we can just tie it a little bit more tightly with the what the other workforce and organizational culture thinks, so we have a consistent approach. So I apologize, I talked for longer than I wanted to. I'm kind of rushing with my brain.
That's okay. Well, why don't we follow up with an email then with next steps? I think that sounds really good, and I think we need to get our heads around something tangible. We've had these great discussions. Now, what are we going to create as a result of them, and what is still needed? We haven't heard from everybody either. You've heard 2 change management stories. There's more out there.
Yes.
So let's get an email out this week with some next steps. And then
absolutely, and I'll I'll work with Scott and with you and your staff to have a meeting as soon as possible to get ready, so that we can then, we may even send out a little survey. We may, but it will also help to connect these efforts with the culture and the workforce, and have a sort of a consistent approach.
Yep, that's good. Okay, 8:27. I always like to end a few minutes early. Any closing comments before we say goodbye?
Thank you very much for organizing this and presenting, and everybody for participating.
Yeah, well, thanks to Alice and Becky for supporting this effort, and everyone take really good care, okay? This is a hard time, and really take good care of yourself and the people around you.